I think we can start now. So welcome to our webinar, EU Declaration of Conformity, Requirements, Workflows and Practical Implementation. Just 57 days are left until 12 August. That's when the first obligations under PPWR will apply, including the EU Declaration of Conformity. And that's exactly what today is about. Many of you have already heard a lot about PPWR, but today it's about making it more practical. Because the key question is, what do you actually need to do and how do you do it efficiently? So in the next hour, we will focus on three things. What is really required for the EU DOC in 2026 from you and your suppliers? What information needs to be included both in the declaration and in the technical documentation, and a clear practical walkthrough of the main articles, which will start applying from 12 August onwards. And most importantly, how can you manage all of this in a structured, digital and automated way? Before we get started, we'd like to understand where you stand today. You will now see a short question on your screen. Please select the answer that reflects best your situation. So, how prepared is your organization to handle PPWR declarations of conformity at scale? Fully prepared, partially prepared, not prepared, too early to say. I'll just wait a little bit until everyone has voted. Okay, thank you. So most of you are partially prepared. What we typically see is that the real challenge is not only understanding the requirements, but mainly managing the process, the data, and the supplier input at scale, and that's exactly what we focus on today. Our presenter today is Hazardous, Managing Director of Packintellect. He brings many years of hands-on experience in recycling systems and packaging compliance, and he will guide you through the requirements step by step and show how to move from manual effort to structured automated workflows. And quick note on questions, you can submit them anytime using the Q&A function. That's the small speech bubble on the top with a question mark, and we'll collect them and address them at the end. So with that, I hand over to you, Sita.
Thank you so much, Julia, and a very good morning to everyone in the call today. We are going to discuss PPWR implementation. So not just focus on what is PPWR, what are the articles that are relevant, but also how to implement that in a more digital and more cost-effective manner today, right? My name is Siddharth Bagri, and I come mainly from the packaging, sorting, recycling, waste management side. I have worked for many years in different parts of Europe, worked as head of recycling at a major waste management and EPR scheme. And we were suffering from PPWR when we first read it in 2024 because it is so unclear and so tough to understand. And today we are focusing more on how to build a solution for this complex and still a little unclear regulation so that we are able to fulfill step by step the compliance requirements as well as the individual national requirements on EPR obligations. Yeah. So glad to share a small presentation with you. If there are any questions, please feel free to put them in the questions box, which you see on the top right side. So I hope my screen is visible. So before we go deep dive in the topic, glad to give you a brief overview on what we do at Packintellect. So we are based out of Germany with a very strong focus on two businesses. First business is the digital part, which is where we have a very strong digital platform, which is integrating recyclability analysis, extended producer responsibility reporting format for different countries, and the creation of EU Declaration of Conformity, complemented by our second business, which is in waste management, recycling, sorting analysis, doing lots of trading of waste materials all across the Europe, actually going in ground and building chemical recycling solutions together with cooperation partners. So these are the two businesses where we operate. Our team is very international because we want to focus a lot on every part of Europe. So that's why we have colleagues bringing expertise in different languages, and all, let's say, which you see are coming from the packaging side, which is also a huge benefit for us because we are not just building a digital solution without having the packaging expertise. It is our second business. It is the colleagues who are bringing packaging experience and then helping us build the right software. Our legal advisors sit in Brussels and in Hamburg, with whom we are, fortunately or unfortunately, we keep on getting lots of updates on PPWR and packaging compliance because EU has been so active in the last month, especially on packaging. We get featured in magazines mainly because of the digital side. Then we participate in exhibitions and we also host our own events. So right now we are in a webinar, but at the end of July, we'll be hosting an event where we'll be inviting more distinguished speakers such as lawyers, brand owners, associations, as well as experts on certain topics, so that it's a full day of PPWR and packaging compliance, where we not only talk about individual topic in detail, but we also go a step further and we talk about the implementation, taking real life examples. Now the question is PPWR a regulation or is it a bureaucratic storm? Unfortunately, it's a bureaucratic storm because the regulation has been written in a hurry, it feels. There's so many unclarities, and every country is doing a different interpretation of different definitions. So that's why the EU is giving more and more information every few weeks, or you will see that the national authorities are giving more explanations on the definitions. Still, what is certain are 3 points. Point number 1 is that the regulation will come on 12th August 2026, so there's no chance of it getting postponed. 12th August right now, as Julia said, is only 57 days away. It means that after this day, every country in EU theoretically should follow PPWR. Now, on a realistic note, there will be some countries which will actually follow the regulation, and there are other countries which are not even so focused on this regulation until now. Second point, which is certain, is that this regulation is pushing towards EU-wide harmonization. So this is the really positive impact of PPWR. Right now, every entity, every member state in Europe acts as an independent entity. In future, we will have a more harmonized approach that all the EU is acting in the same direction. Everyone is having the same guidelines on EPR. Everyone needs to do the declaration of conformity, should have the recycling infrastructure, which is good enough to fulfill the targets of PPWR. So this is the positive impact. Today, the efforts that we put in different countries, that will get reduced in future when we have a EU-wide approach, ideally from 2028, when we have the labeling requirements. And then point number 3, which is also certain, is in order to ensure that the regulation is followed, we will need lots of data, we will need lots of evidences, and we will have to build traceability along the supply chain. So this is an additional bureaucracy that is now coming with this regulation. But if you're working with any other regulation, such as EUDR, or you're working with CSRD, or you're working with supply chain regulations, then EU is going in this direction anyways, that they want more transparency, they want more data management, and they want traceability. So it's a step forward that we have to take. It's bureaucracy now, but from a longer term perspective, let's say all the regulations in the EU are going in the same direction: harmonization and traceability. These are the many different articles which is impacting PPWR. Every article in itself is a very big topic. So when we say that in PPWR we need to fulfill articles 5 to 12, then 24, 26, these articles are not small topics. Every article in itself has a major impact on the packaging supply chain, on the packaging design, or on packaging waste. Right? So today we'll be focusing a lot on the most important articles that are relevant in 2026, and we will only briefly go through the many articles which are listed here. Right? So starting with Article 5. This article is coming in force from 12th August 2026 itself. It means that every company that places packaging in the market must ensure that they do not have substances of concern in the packaging. If they have substances of concern, then it should not be above the allowed concentration. We will be going in depth on this particular article in the next slides, but this article becomes relevant for 12th August 2026. The next article is recyclable packaging, or focused on the recyclability of the packaging. Now, this article is very interesting because it's the only article that has a direct financial impact on a producer. EPR fees needs to be paid by every producer who places packaging in the EU market. This EPR fees in future has to be eco-modulated based on the recyclability. In easier terms, higher the recyclability of my packaging, lower will be my EPR fees. That's why this article has a very high importance. It is not applicable from this year onwards, but you already see the discussions that there is a SEN methodology right now which is being discussed. Then there are associations like Recyclas who are very active in recyclability assessment. You have individual countries such as Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, France, Denmark, who are very, very active on giving out its own recyclability methodologies, because this article has high significance combined with EPR fees. So this article, for future perspective, very relevant, and this will also have major impact on the packaging design, on understanding how the waste management infrastructure works. Why is my packaging not recyclable? How can I improve its recyclability? Article number 7, that is based on the minimum recycled content in plastic packaging. Recently, Germany gave out recently the German Parliament has approved the FAPAC DG. So this is the Verpackungsdurchführungsgesetz, the German national implementation for PPWR. Now this PPWR, or this FAPAC DG, the German regulation, is now also going to promote integration of recycled content, is also going to promote eco-modulated EPR fees. There are many countries where there is a plastic tax, which is indirectly also pushing for use of recycled content. PPWR is now focused through this article on ensuring that every plastic packaging that enters the market should have a minimum recycled content. Now, this recycled content percentage is decided on the application. So whether it's a food contact packaging, indirect food contact, whether it's contact sensitive, non-contact sensitive beverage bottles, depending on the application, the recycled content is determined. But this article will get relevant in 2030, and that's why we expect more and more support for the recycling industry, new technologies such as chemical recycling also contributing in helping us fulfill this article. Article number 8 is on bio-based raw materials in plastic packaging. So if we have raw materials coming from agriculture waste, if we have raw materials coming from other organic waste, and then bio-based materials, bio-based plastics are being produced out of it, then that can also contribute towards the plastic packaging. And this is exclusively covered in article number 8. There is still limited information on this article, and more information is expected in the next years. Article number 9, if you are bringing tea or coffee packaging in the market, then this is extremely relevant for those packaging. This article is very focused on compostable packaging to ensure that compostable packaging should actually be industrially compostable, and which is the right way of sorting it at home. So which is the right disposal bin, right? So taking an example of a tea bag, today the tea bag, we don't know if it's compostable or not, but we are always, or mostly we are throwing it in the bio bin, right? Now, is the bio bin going in industrial composting? Is the bio bin going in home composting? Is the tea bag actually compostable or not, right? So these are some issues that we face today. This particular article is very focused on compostable packaging, ensuring that in future the coffee capsules, the tea bags, which still have organic content inside after use, when they are going in the bio bin, when they are going in home composting, when they're going in industrial composting, the packaging is actually compostable. Yeah. Right now, the article is more focused on industrial composting. Home composting is something that the individual member states will provide more information on. Article number 10, minimization of packaging. This article is very relevant for those packaging such as cosmetics, which are having thicker walls, which are having false bottoms, or for those packaging where I'm using higher volumes of packaging, although my product is very less in the quantity. So whenever there is a possibility to reduce the amount of packaging, to reduce the weight of the packaging, then this article will take force and will ensure that there is a way to minimize the packaging which is currently in use. How to calculate the minimization? We'll get this methodology in the next years. This article is not applicable right now in 2026, but this article is going to impact how the packaging is designed for future, because certain industries, certain branches of our industry, cosmetic being one of the best examples here, will get impacted heavily, where you have to provide information that why am I using such thick glass packaging in a perfume bottle? Why am I not able to reduce it? If it's solely being used for marketing purpose, is that actually circular? Right? Because PPWR as a whole has a target of reducing the overall packaging weight, the overall packaging being used in the market. Article number 11. Now, this article is again relevant for 12th August 2026. Whenever I'm placing reusable packaging in the market, that's where I need to provide a proper documentation and description that how is this packaging actually in reuse? Is it in a closed loop system? Is it in an open loop system? This is relevant for transport packaging as well as for beverage bottles, right? So whenever I have a pallet in a pooling system, how is that working, right? Who is responsible? Who is the manufacturer of that pallet? Yeah, and how can I provide detailed information that this is actually in reuse? Article number 12. This article is actually pushing everyone towards digitalization. In future, in 2028, we will have this article in force, and then this article is ensuring that, should ensure that every packaging in the EU has a harmonized label. So when I, as a consumer, am buying the packaging, I'm able to read the label, and this label is the same in whichever country in the EU, and I'm able to identify that, okay, this is the material of this packaging. So that's why I have to throw it in that particular waste disposal bin. Now imagine that if you are having a big packaging, you have enough space on your label. But if you're having small sizes of packaging, how are you going to fit those labels? How are you going to fit the required information? Right now, we will start with basic labels. In future, we need information on EPR, we need information on material, on recyclability. How will all that information fit on the label of the packaging? That's why this labeling requirement is pushing the companies to go with QR codes, go with other digital carriers, so that all the traceability, all the information can be stored in particularly that QR code. And then the last but not the least, Article 39. This is the most important article because this article is the basic legal requirement that every packaging unit should have before it enters the market. A declaration of conformity with the PPWR. So when I place packaging in the market, which is complying with this regulation, I need to ensure that I have a declaration of conformity that clearly declares that I have followed the above articles and my packaging is compliant with PPWR. So now we'll start going in PPWR obligations for 2026. First obligation is for article number 5. This article focuses to reduce the amount of hazardous substances or substances of concern in the packaging components or packaging material. There are two main hazardous substances which are being considered in this article. First is heavy metals. Here, heavy metals are 4: lead, cadmium, mercury, and hexavalent chromium, as you can see here. So cadmium, lead, chromium, mercury. When these 4 are present individually or together in any packaging component or the packaging itself, then the combined concentration of the 4 should be less than 100 milligrams per kilogram. This is the most important requirement for all packaging entering the market. This is applicable for food and non-food applications, applicable from this year itself. The second requirement under this article is on PFAS. This is only applicable for direct food contact applications. PFAS has been a very controversial material since, or let's say very controversial chemical since many years. If you remember, then France was already focusing or was already talking about banning completely use of PFAS in the past, in 2022, 2023. So this PFAS is considered as a forever chemical that when it is used in packaging, if it is, let's say, being consumed by humans, then it's a forever chemical. It just doesn't get destroyed or gets decomposed by itself. So that's where more restrictions are coming from the EU on this particular chemical, especially for food contact applications only. So now whenever a food contact packaging is coming in the market, if it has PFAS, then it has to be within these limits. So individual PFAS, sum of PFAS, or total fluorine, right? They have to be very, very limited so that there is no concern of these harmful substances affecting the human body. Now, in addition to these two obligations, all the other chemical safety rules, which are anyways being followed, they need to be followed. These two are on top. These two are the additional requirements. If you look at the timeline, then we see that every year, every 1.5 years, the EU is going to give more and more feedback, is going to analyze how is the, let's say, chemical safety around us. And if the requirements increase, then we'll get it through further delegated acts. Now, we have tried to analyze that where do we find heavy metals? Heavy metals are usually used in packaging which have very high printing inks and dyes. When there is chances of plastic master batches to increase the color or to put very shiny, bright colors, or to have, whenever we are integrating recycled resins, it's possible that they might have some contamination. Glass packaging has usually a lead content in it. So these are the 4 different areas where we have identified where the heavy metals are present and where the limits of heavy metals could go beyond the allowed limits. PFAS is actually being used a lot in food contact packaging because it has a primary function for grease proofing and water resistance. So if you see these these food packaging, which is shown in infographics, they usually have a very buttery feeling. They usually have a grease-proof feeling. That's why they contain these oily foods, right? And this is where PFAS is likely to be found. So as you can see, fast food packaging, bakery products, molded fibers in certain cases to hold liquids without disintegrating, and then microwave popcorn. Now, the issue with the PFAS is that when it is present in these packagings, right, then how to analyze that these PFAS can actually be tested and they are below the limits, or how to get your supplier to understand that they need to do these kind of tests. So this is where we are also cooperating with the SGS Institute Fresenius, and through SGS we work together in ensuring and in bringing the understanding that what exactly is PFAS, where do you find it mostly, and if it needs to be analyzed, then SGS is one of the strong providers of lab testing and expertise on such topics. Right? So more on this we'll be explaining at the end. But these chemicals which needs to be restricted, this is a requirement for 2026. So when you're bringing such kind of packaging in the market, ensure that you have the right test reports, you have the right supplier evidences, so that when an audit happens, you have the right documents to prove. The next article, which is relevant for 2026, is the article number 11. This article focuses on reusable packaging. We will check some examples of what types of reusable packaging. But the target of this article is to ensure that when a packaging is coming with the intention of reuse, it is actually in a system, it is actually in a process where it can be used multiple times, where there are certain number of rotations possible, while ensuring that the safety, hygiene, and product quality is there. This article is already, or let's say such concepts are already in the market. This is not new. So for beverage drinks and beverage or fast food, there are already concepts that you can have reuse, recups, rebowls, where you can take them in a deposit and return system and then use them again and again. There are also examples of beverage bottles, beverage cans, which can be reused, which can be in a deposit and return system. But now the requirement is going a little beyond just those packaging, and this will also apply to transport packaging such as transport pallets, transport boxes, transport kiston. So certain examples, beverage bottles. This is where we see that beer bottles, refillable beverage bottles, crates, they are a lot in reuse. In the HoReCa sector, we have transport crates, food delivery containers, the isothermal boxes. So this is again, how is it actually in reuse? Between which companies is it coming in reuse? Is it an open loop system? Is it a closed loop system, right? Is there a deposit and return, or is it happening within the companies in a pooling system? Then e-commerce transport or industrial packaging such as IBC containers, drums, pallets, foldable boxes. So whenever you're bringing such packaging in the market and you consider these packaging to be in a reuse system, then we actually need to document that how is it in reuse, what needs to be done to ensure that this is actually in multiple rotations. Now going on to Article 39. What is the Declaration of Conformity? So we saw that there are two articles which are relevant for 2026. Number one is Article 5 and number two is Article 11. These two articles need to be documented, need to be compliant before the packaging comes in the market. And these articles must be part of the EU Declaration of Conformity. Now, this Declaration of Conformity is actually getting inspired from the CE conformity. So many of us know the CE conformity is part of product compliance. Whenever you see a CE logo, then you are sure that, okay, this product has followed a certain standard, has followed a certain norm. Same thing now will happen with packaging, that every packaging must have a declaration of conformity. We don't need to put a mark on it. with DOC or CE, but when required, then a certificate, then a declaration can be shown. This declaration should contain the information about packaging, its description, the technical documents that are being attached with it. How is it following the Article 5 to 12? And this declaration applies to all types of packaging. So it is not only restricted to sales packaging, it is also required for transport, e-commerce, primary production, all types of packaging. This is a formal legal declaration, so it is not just let's say an internal document. This document is a legal declaration applicable all across the EU. This should cover from Article 5 to 12 all the articles which are applicable to that particular packaging. Yeah. So this is also an important part here, that you need to be able to identify that which article is actually relevant for that packaging and who is the responsible company, the responsible person for making this declaration of conformity. So what happens with the declaration of conformity? It's a legal permission. It is required for authority verification. Not just authority, even your colleagues in the supply chain will ask you for a declaration of conformity. So imagine if you're selling to retailers, to supermarkets, to big outlets, then those companies will be considered as final distributors. These are the companies that bring packaging directly to consumers. So then in B2B case, your final partner is going to ask you about the declaration of conformity. The final distributor can ask this to any of the companies in the supply chain. A distributor can ask a manufacturer to provide them the declaration of conformity. And any of the companies in supply chain can get audited, and that's when every packaging placed in the market should have a declaration of conformity. The positive part is that you create the declaration once. There is no expiration date. It means that you can update the declaration when you're bringing new packaging in the market or when you're updating that particular packaging. You also need to update the declaration when more articles are coming in force. Yeah, but positive thing is you're creating it once. You don't have to create it every year, the same thing. Second is that it is one document that is valid across all 27 member states. Here, the only challenge is language, because it's possible that every country is asking for declaration in its own language. So that's where you will have to ensure that this declaration can be present in different languages. Yeah, if the requirement exists. What happens if there is no declaration of conformity? Because let's say time is running out, not running out yet, but will run out soon. The question is, what happens if there is no declaration of conformity, right? Then there are risks of penalties. There are risks of product recalls and market bans, depending on the scale of non-compliance. Giving you an example, in the German regulation, which is now approved from the Bundestag, that's where they have proposed a fine of up to 10,000 euros for non-compliance with PPWR or EU Declaration of Conformity. So if that 10,000 will apply to one company for complete non-compliance, will apply to certain packagings, don't know. But there is definitely an interest from the authorities that everyone is following the regulation. And also I see, to be honest, our opinion is we see it more positive, because if you are putting efforts, if we are all in the call, it means that you're dedicating resources on packaging compliance. Then why should you not benefit from your competitors who might not be putting efforts in packaging compliance? So this is the benefit of PPWR, that everyone is on the same starting line. Now, one of the most important points before we start in PPWR implementation, before you take any action, is to identify what is your role and what are your obligations. So we have 6 main economic operators as per PPWR. The manufacturer of the packaging, importer is any company that brings packaging in the EU from outside the EU. Within the EU, then there is a distributor. Final distributor, retailer are the companies who are selling B2C as the last point of contact between all businesses and then directly engaging with customers. Fulfillment service providers, so these are, let's say, famous online shops such as Amazon, Temu, Shein. These companies are placing packaging in the market through online sellers, right? And the amount of packaging that is coming in the market is huge. The volume is increasing every year from online businesses. So these platforms are considered as fulfillment service provider. In addition to DHL, FedEx, these are also companies considered as fulfillment service providers. And then supplier. Supplier is the one who's supplying the packaging materials to the manufacturer. Now, before we go in depth in the regulation, I have to warn you that these terms in the regulation are not exactly the same as we use in commercial language, right? So all of us are coming from packaging, and for us, a packaging manufacturer is actually the company who's manufacturing that particular packaging. But in this case, a manufacturer in PPWR is any company that is putting its brand, logo, trademark on the packaging or is giving the contract for the packaging manufacturing. It means it's possible that I'm only putting my brand on it, or I'm giving a contract to put my brand and logo on the packaging, and I will be considered as the manufacturer, right? So always remember that these terms, these definitions are not exactly the same as in commercial terms. That's why we need to go in depth and we need to understand what exactly is the definition and what is my role. Who am I as an economic operator? So today we'll focus on three economic operators only. One is the manufacturer. Manufacturer is any company that puts its label, brand, logo on the packaging. As the manufacturer, this is the central duty to complete the assessment process, to ensure full technical documentation, and to create and sign the Declaration of Conformity. It means that manufacturer is the one who's signing all the documents, is taking the complete responsibility, and is storing the documents for the next 5 to 10 years. The next important economic operator are the importers. Importers are based in the EU, and that's where they are bringing packaging from outside the EU here. Now, importers are not the manufacturers, of course, but importers are the companies who might get audited from the authorities, because the authorities won't be able to reach out to outside the EU so easily, right? So that's why the importer will come under scrutiny, and the importer should ensure that they have complete documentation, so technical documents, they have the declaration of conformity, and they are also storing their information, their declaration of conformity for the next 5 years or 10 years, depending on the type of packaging. In addition, both the manufacturer and the importer must ensure that they have their name, address, serial number, contact information on every packaging. This is a standard practice for sales packaging. Wherever you see sales packaging, you see on the pack, who's the manufacturer. But just imagine for transport packaging, for carton boxes, for shrink wraps, for tapes, there is no information. It means that now this additional requirement of Article 15 for a manufacturer needs to be fulfilled. And in order to fulfill that, of course, we are also having a QR code solution. So we always go in the direction of digitalization and would propose that don't start printing new packagings. Instead, use QR codes so that the information can be updated. Yeah, but Article 15, we are not mentioning it here, but Article 15, check it out later. It's very, very relevant to have the required information on the packaging. So we have covered manufacturer and importer. The last economic operator is actually, from our perspective, the most important economic operator. Without a supplier, none of the other economic operators could become compliant, because a supplier is actually the company who's making the packaging materials or who's having all the information about the packaging materials. Supplier is responsible to provide this information ahead to the different economic operators, usually the manufacturer, so that the declaration of conformity can be made. Now, the supplier is playing such a critical role, and there are so many suppliers to make one unit of packaging. So the information flow between the suppliers and manufacturers, that is a big challenge. How do you get the required information? How do you get the documentation? What if it doesn't come on time, right? So this is a major challenge between the supplier and all other economic operators, the flow of information. Yeah. So we have only covered these three, but just remember that the economic operator or the role is not for a company. The role is based on the packaging. So it's possible that you're a manufacturer of one packaging and you're an importer for the other packaging. Okay. So it's always on per packaging basis. We have tried to make it simpler with the table. Honestly, it's not so simple. That's why we also recommend not to look just on the internet or not to just engage with AI tools, rather take more, let's say, bring more expertise so that you're definitely sure that what is your obligation. We should target not to overfill the obligations. We should target not to not be compliant and to not have the right knowledge of the economic operator rules. So now PPWR regulation versus reality. What we see is coming from the regulation is the declaration of conformity needs to be done. This year, substances of concerns and reusable packaging are of high focus. They have to be compliant. Recyclability of packaging becoming a very high focus for different countries. Individual member states are pushing for eco-modulated EPR fees. Packaging minimization, use of recycled content, these are topics coming in future. But from a, let's say from a long-term perspective, we have to start thinking about these topics latest by 2028. Yeah. And then mandatory labeling requirements. One requirement that will harmonize how we see packaging in the EU coming in 28. So lots of things happening. PPWR will come in phases, but the reality is that this will all lead to rising costs. We need lots of transparency from suppliers. So the supply chain has to be very clearly defined. There needs to be regular exchange of information. We'll have to put efforts in data management, whether that effort is in spreadsheet or whether that effort is on a digital side. Efforts will have to be made. And then the last point, which is unfortunate, is that there is still unclarity from national implementation. There are many countries in the EU who are not even communicating anything on PPWR. Some countries are, but there are still a lot who have not said anything on PPWR. So that's where we still have a few unclear points from certain countries. In short, there's a lot to do before 12th August 2026. How we propose that do it smart and digital, right? So we are working in packaging compliance, in PPWR, in recycling, sorting since many years, and we have suffered with the bureaucracy of not just this regulation. There's also Single-Use Plastics Directive, there is EUDR, and then EPR, which is one of the most complex things to fulfill. That's where the idea came that, okay, how to put everything together in a way to ensure that, number one, there is good understanding. Number two, that there is one time all-in-one digital implementation. So this is what we do. We have two approaches. First approach is the smart way. This is where we provide workshops, consultations, give supplier trainings, very dedicated towards one's packaging portfolio. So we analyze the portfolio, we determine what is the role, obligation, what are the next steps, create a roadmap for the next 5 years so that PPWR implementation is happening as a process, not in a panic. Supplier training, very crucial because we are working with many suppliers from Asia, and we see that the knowledge on PPWR is not there because they are following the different regulations in those countries. And that's why knowledge, data sharing, importance of PPWR That is a part of supplier training. Then we support in data preparation, because it's a one-time effort. If it is done correctly, then every year it will become a process. If it is not done correctly, then every year we'll be dedicating lots of resources and time in just preparing the data. And then the digital way is when we have understood the regulation, when we have understood how the implementation, when we have understood how the regulation works, what is our obligation, then we go towards implementation. So on our platform, with a few clicks, you can create the declaration of conformity. You can create the technical documentations just with a few clicks. Second is that we have a dedicated supplier portal. What we want to avoid is that there is back and forth emails with my 100 suppliers, and then they're asking me all the questions, although there is so much information present in the market. So in order to avoid that, we have a dedicated supplier portal where the users can log in, can directly upload all the information, can give the confirmations that is there heavy metals or not, is there PFAS or not, is my packaging in reuse, then how is it in reuse? No? So that's where we are also pushing some work towards the supplier so that all of us are going forward in a much faster way. Third point is recyclability analysis. So we use German minimum standard and Recyclers for analyzing the recyclability. I'm a certified auditor for Recyclers. We also cooperate with other auditors for German minimum standard. And we are going to integrate more and more recyclability analysis for different countries, because we see that every country is having slightly different methodology. Results are slightly different, but whichever packaging is not recyclable in one country is very likely not recyclable in the other one. Yeah. So that should be the target, to identify, am I using bleeding inks? Why is that a problem? Am I using carbon black? Why is that a problem? And then last is the critical EPR data management. So EPR is unfortunately still not going to get harmonized from PPWR, because every country has the authority to define how EPR will be managed. Yeah. And that is why every country will still have a different EPR national implementation. What we are doing is we are ensuring that once the data is taken, then all the obligations in different countries are identified digitally, and then a digital reporting is created so that there is no manual effort required. Yeah. So multi-country EPR management. So we have 3 dedicated portals. Whether you're a supplier or you are a brand owner, this is the possibility that you can use. Number 1 is a supplier portal. So this is where you can engage with lots of suppliers, get all the information on the supplier portal. This information goes towards the user portal. This is where me as a user can analyze recyclability, do multi-country EPR management, or create the declarations and the technical documentation. When I've created these documents, then I can directly share them with my customers, which could be retailers, which could be supermarkets, or other colleagues in B2B supply chain. So no email exchange, no spreadsheets. All the information is digital and easily accessible, everything based in the EU. So I'll not explain the process a lot in detail, but we are doing lots of bulk data management. It means that directly connecting with ERP systems, with SAPs, with other packaging management tools. Then there is a direct input of Excel. So you can have your own Excel sheet, you can have your own spreadsheet data, own templates, and then we integrate all of this information with a bulk import. Packaging management, so you can upload specifications, you can ask your suppliers to provide specifications. This will be a great opportunity to get, let's say, the supplier management system in place. Define the packaging definition, and then the software will tell you what is your obligation. So the software will calculate and will tell you that, okay, based on this and this and this input, this is the obligation for Article 5 that you need to fulfill, or you are obligated to fulfill Article 11, yes or no. If you look at the data management system, then this was the data management part. After that, I can integrate the suppliers on the supplier portal, link all the data. It means that I will be able to understand if I'm supplying the same carton box in different sizes. I don't want to create different DOCs for it. I don't want to create different declarations for it. Or if the same shampoo bottle is present in different colors or in different sizes, how to group them together. That structuring happens from the software. It intelligently determines that what exactly needs to be grouped together and then gives a recommendation. Once this part is done, then these two documents, which is the core of Article 39, are created automatically. We are partnering with recyclers for the recyclability auditing, which is very crucial because recyclers is, let's say, one of the most practical and circular driven associations, very focused on recyclability. We cooperate with SGS Institute to ensure that whenever expertise is required on PFAS or on heavy metals, then we have the right experts together with us, and we cooperate with different PROs for EPR, because we see that PROs are the first point of contact for the customers, for the producers, and that's where we support PROs with our digital solutions. We are working with lots of companies from different fields, so different areas: automotives, cosmetic, food, home, furniture, also lots of suppliers who are supplying paper packaging, plastic packaging. And what we notice is that understanding the regulation is the first point, then the implementation happens, and the implementation can be very fast and very digital if there is a good understanding, there's a good fundamental to the regulation. And giving you a very sneak peek on how the platform works. So right now I'm going towards the user portal, which is the app.packintellect.com. This is where I engage as a user. And then we have a separate portal for suppliers, which is the supplier.packintellect.com. And this is where the suppliers engage. Whether you're acting as a user or you're acting as a supplier, both of them give you the possibility to exchange all the data, to share, and to optimize as much as possible with your suppliers, with your packaging. Now, as a user, I can invite my whole team here. I can have multiple colleagues acting together with me, as well as I can also assign that who is responsible for signatures. I can do digital signatures on the platform so that I don't have to download each and every document, each and every declaration of conformity. Then we create really strong reports on recyclability assessment, on PPWR assessments. So here you will also see that, okay, which packaging was tested, and then how can I see the results of this packaging, which grade is it, how do I improve the packaging compliance. For EPR, we are doing multi-country EPR management, so we cover many countries in Europe, and the process is quite straightforward. For product management, everything starts with product import, and this is where we can import the packaging data as well as we can import the supplier data. Packaging data either via Excel, via API, or manual entry. Regardless of how I import the packaging data, we clearly define what are the data points that we are expecting from the companies. These data points can be very detailed if you want to do recyclability analysis, or they can be very basic if you just want to do a declaration of conformity creation. But whenever I have questions, whenever I need some support in any language, then I can always ask them. Bachelor's role, for example. And this question, I can ask it in different languages. I will ask it in French. And that's also the support we get, that I can create the documents, I can create the declarations in any language, and the answers will be very accurate because the AI will only give answers if it is relevant to PPWR, otherwise it will not give any answers. So this was a sneak peek, let's say, on the platforms. What we propose as the next step Number one, analyze your packaging portfolio so that you know that for which packaging are you responsible as a manufacturer, for which are you a supplier or an importer. These are very important to determine. Based on this, the whole compliance journey will take place. Step number two, start preparing the data. If you're using spreadsheets, if you're using SAP, Oracle, other packaging management systems, target is to centralize the data. If you're having multiple entities in different parts of the world, target is to coordinate and centralize the data. Step number three, supplier training. Suppliers should understand why do they need to give you the data, although they are not going to get paid more from you. So still, why do they need to provide this additional data, additional documents, right? What type of data? How can they upload the data or share the data with you in a digital format? Step number four, supplier engagement. Onboard the suppliers, start getting the information. Step number five, create automated documents. So few clicks, you are being conformed with the technical documentations with the EU DOC. Step number six is ideally to complete everything by 12th August 2026. Since we are still in June, this timeline is still, let's say, very easily doable, because the parts whenever a software is engaged is very automatized. If we wait until end of July, then it will be tough to reach 6 steps in 6 days. So try to plan it in a way that you're compliant by 12th August 2026. And with that, Julia, I'm looking at the time and I'm last, let's say, quite punctual with just 1 minute remaining.
Yes, so thank you for the presentation. We have a few questions that I would like to raise. First one, will companies need to create a separate declaration of conformity for every packaging item, or are there any ways to streamline the process?
So only the manufacturer needs to create the declaration of conformity. You create a declaration for one packaging unit. So you don't create it for every packaging component. So if I have a beverage bottle, then my cap, bottle, and label together is one unit, and I'm creating a declaration for that particular unit. Did that answer the question?
Yes. And the software can also do this kind of.
Exactly. Like that's what I meant. That in an automatized way, the software should be able to do it, but it's always for a packaging unit.
Okay, so next question is also regarding UDOC. What if your packaging does not contain PFAS or heavy metals, or is not reusable? Do you still need to do the DOC for all packaging?
Yes, because in this manner, let's say if your packaging is not reusable, single-use packaging, then you are not obliged under Article 11. But if you are saying that your packaging doesn't have PFAS and heavy metals, what is the evidence that it really doesn't have heavy metals and PFAS? So add that evidence and create the declaration of conformity also for that packaging.
Okay, so there's no way out of creating
No,
a DOC this year.
correct. So the declaration of conformity applies to all packaging, regardless of the application, the type, the scope, and every packaging unit must have a declaration of conformity.
Okay, yeah. Another question was regarding these obligations to have the manufacturer's name and address on the packaging. You already talked about this and also the solution that can be done via the QR code. Can you quickly explain the difference between Article 15 and 12 and which one is coming when?
Sure. So we have a digital QR code solution based on which you can create or you can fulfill the Article 15 obligations. Now, the Article 15 obligations are very focused on just a few details from the manufacturer. So, manufacturer's names, address, serial number, charge number of the packaging, contact details. Right? This needs to be present in case an authority, an auditor wants to connect with you. Yeah. The Article 12 is on mandatory labeling requirements. This is where the labeling of the packaging across the EU will get harmonized. So in 2028, we will see that every packaging has one symbol, one label. I'm assuming now because there's no delegated act yet, but we have a JRC report. This label will tell me as a consumer what is the material of the package. When I understand as a consumer that this is plastic, then I'm throwing it in the yellow bag in Germany or in the blue bag in Netherlands, right? So this is the target of the Article 12 to have harmonized label. There will be more requirements on EPR obligations, that how is the EPR being followed, how can I add that information in the label. The target is to go, let's say, if you start printing the packaging, then you'll be changing the packaging printing every year. That's for sure. So instead of doing that, we propose a QR code, and I can share here a link of our QR code solution in the chat.
Okay, so basically Article 15 is coming this year, Article 12 is coming in 2028.
Correct. Correct.
So before we wrap up, one final question from our side. So I'm sharing again the phone. What would be most helpful for you as a next step? We can vote again here. Is it a live demo, a discussion with an expert, or additional information and guidance on PPWR, or are you rather evaluating internally for now?
I think many of the colleagues are in lunch break already, but let's see. It's lunch break, Julia.
It's more divided between live demo, but also more additional information. Okay. Thank you for voting, everyone who's still there. So thank you very much. Before we close, thank you all for joining today. I hope this session gave you a better understanding of the EUDC what you have to do this year. And if you are still unsure with PPWR requirements, feel free to try our free PPWR compliance check that we developed. I already shared the link in the chat. It helps you to identify your obligations and understand the next steps. And if you like to see how technical documentation and EUDC can be managed and created automatically, then we are happy to show you our platform in a live demo.